number of craters to be presumed in the old body. That would be using impact theory by counting the number of craters on a surface and assuming a certain number of objects will impact over a given period. I personally reject this hypothesis, that rocks and dust left over from stellar formations smash together in a destructive process to form planets. Also specifically looking at Ceres, its home is in the asteroid belt and is surrounded by possible impactors. I'm also well aware of another alternative theory in which the surface of Ceres was electrically machined. This hypothesis is supported by what are peculiarities to impact theory, but are features readily produced during an electrical discharge. Craters that have craters perched preferentially on their rims, or craters that share rims, straight-edge craters that form polygonal shapes, and craters that have a sort of rippled ridge or distorted ring appearance. After observing electrical discharge experiments firsthand, I can say with confidence that most of the craters on Ceres are indeed formed electrically. Craters I've observed time and time again stand out like beacons on a cratered body such as Ceres. If this electrical hypothesis is true, what then was the source of such an electrical outburst capable of producing the features and bodies we observe? We find possible explanations to this question on previous space news. In a video done by Eugene Bagashoff titled Mars Mysteries Reopened, Eugene discusses the discovery of low-density material on Martian surfaces, asteroids, and comets.
I'm not paying any attention to the video. I'm just looking at the fishes, which a red one disappeared. Oh, you're right there. Alright. There you go. Sorry about that. But anyway, it's 11, supposedly 49 in the evening. Fishes have been in since 3 o'clock, and they are alive. I've been using that water this water that came from the game store. Game store is not the right word. The pet store, PetSmart. This is the food. I did put in conditioner. So now what the deal is tonight. That was an artificial. So was that one. Even though I have plenty of. They're not artificial. What's going on, bud? Come on. Hey, there we go. Whee! Is that the two of them have been up against this. Whoops. This. Both of them tonight. But they obviously cannot jump the barrier. So that's beautiful. I love it. The twin going up against the top of the tank.
Electric discharge.
That was just gorgeous. This guy is shy compared to wee Whitey yesterday. Oh, right. Here.
Welcome to Space News from the Electric Universe.
And,
Thunderbolts Project.
He's quite a bit smaller than wee Whitey Sr.
How do planets form?
Come on,
It's
bud.
a question that astronomers with ever-increasing frequency have acknowledged is unresolved. For
40
countless
years of
decades, astronomers have subscribed to the nebula
having these
hypothesis
fish.
of
I'm a
planetary
little
formation, which proposes that planets form from a
I'm a
process
little
of accretion in a cloud of gas and
perturbed.
dust that is gravitationally collapsed. But with the discovery of thousands of
So anyway,
baffling exoplanetary systems, some astronomers are now openly searching for a, quote, whole new theory. In our own solar system,
I have
recent science
a
discoveries
theory
only deepen the mystery of planet formation.
of what
Consider
happened,
the findings
which
of NASA's Dawn mission
I'm not
at the
willing to
dwarf
share
planet Ceres,
until
the first object ever discovered
tomorrow,
in the main asteroid belt. The mysteries
because
include why the heavily cratered surface of Ceres
I'm
features a
choosing
surprising absence of large craters, why we've never found any meteorites from Ceres on Earth, and it's a puzzle where exactly Ceres might have formed, in
let
part
these
because
guys
it's
think. But
vastly larger and rounder
they
than
have
its
it right here,
asteroidal neighbors. As members of
and
the Electric Universe community are well aware, Ceres' massively cratered surface
I
may
hope
provide clear
they don't
evidence of the electrical events in which it formed.
testosterone
In this episode,
each
Thunderbolt's
other to
colleague,
death.
experimentalist Jacob Gable, explores
We'll
the
find
formation
out.
and evolution of
That's what the
Ceres from
concept
electric
of this
Ceres is said to be a young body
barrier
because the surface
is.
lacks the number of craters to be presumed in the old body.
Is
That
that
would
you
be
can
using
have
impact
two
by
bait.
counting the number of craters on a
Siamese
surface
fighting fish. I'm so
and
tired of
assuming a
calling them
certain number of
betas.
objects will impact over a
You could
given
have two
period.
Siamese fighting fish
I
in
personally
one
reject
tank.
this hypothesis that rocks and dust
Yeah.
swept over from
Oh
stellar
no,
formations
my
smashed
voice.
together in a destructive process to form
My
planets.
voice is too high.
Also specifically looking at Ceres,
It's very
it's orbited in
difficult
the asteroid belt and is surrounded by possible impactors. I'm
to
also
not
well
speak
aware
above.
of another alternative theory in which the surface of Ceres was electrically machined. This hypothesis is supported by what are
The
peculiarities to
machines.
impact theory.
The
What are features readily
machines.
produced during an electrical discharge?
Because I know how that works. I know
Craters
that if I
have
just said
craters
the
perched
machines,
preferentially on their rims,
that it will carry,
or
but
craters that share rims, straight edge craters that form polygonal shapes, and craters that have a sort of
you
ripple
gotta.
ridge or distorted ring appearance.
There's no way around it.
After observing electrical
You gotta
discharge
raise your
experiments
voice
firsthand, I
to
can
get
say with
around the
confidence
machines.
that most of the craters on Ceres
Even
are
though
indeed formed electrically.
I would
Craters I've observed time and time
prefer
again stand out like
to
beacons on a
speak
cratered
down
body such as Ceres.
here.
If this electrical hypothesis is true,
So
what
what's up
then
with you, buddy?
was the source of such an electrical outburst capable of producing the features
Hello.
and bodies we observe?
Oh
We
yeah.
find possible explanations to this question on previous Space
Let me
News.
put the fish
In a
food away.
video
Here
done
we
by
go.
Eugene Bagashoff titled Mars
So
Mystery
Eugene
3.0,
Bagashoff has his
Eugene
own channel.
discusses the discovery of emergency material on
Eugene
Martian surfaces,
Bagashoff has his own
asteroids,
channel.
and comets. And these
And,
materials are suspected to be porous as a
there we
result
go.
of the low density. This finding gives
He's
rise
been
to a hypothesis
rare
of
in the
low
last
rainfall.
week and a half.
After discussing another video done by Walt Thornhill titled The
Did
Saturn
you come
Earth
up?
Connection in Our Place
Did
in the
you
Universe.
disappear? Where did you
In the
go,
video,
bud?
Walt discusses the discovery of
Whitey.
the deuterium ratios of water found on Earth and water found in Saturn's rings, and how it differs greatly from the
Oh,
nebular
look at him.
hypothesis predictions.
He's all buried
Another
down
point
here.
to make note of, the two
Way
ratios
down there.
are remarkably similar. This would suggest that the Earth and Saturn were close by at one point, or even that we received water from Saturn, which is what Immanuel Velikovsky had suggested. Because there is a connection between water found on Earth and water found in Saturn, there's a conundrum that
I'll
arises.
feel better.
That being Mars, the asteroid belt, and
But
Jupiter
my
sit
other
in
fish
between
used to
Earth
do that
and
as
Saturn.
well.
This is
They
only
totally would
unfortunate
come
and a
and
nebulous
hide
hypothesis, but it is a
on
possible
this
clue to
side of
what
the
might have
rocks
happened in an electrical
from the
hypothesis,
computer
where stars
screen.
are formed along electrical currents and are subject to changes in those currents.
Oh, I can't
Walt
believe it.
Thornhill also
I'm
discussed
talking
a
like that.
hypothesis he proposed, in which he suggests that the planet Saturn was once a dwarf star with a plasma glow that encircled planets in its vicinity. Saturn was then captured by the Sun, causing an electrical flare above Saturn and the resultant familiar solar system. I believe if this were to happen, the plasma or current from Saturn would have been
Well,
removed and would
Laser
have
ain't doing
traveled.
something. And I understand why.
This could have caused enormous eruptions. In experiments with low-pressure discharges on silica, the electrical current can be shut off, causing material to be ejected from the surface. Eruptions can also be observed producing porosity throughout the silica, to make note of Eugene Bagashev's video. So it's quite plausible that Saturn could have played a more dominant role over the Earth. The Sun came into play and stole Saturn's electrical current. When the plasma was removed, material would be ejected, forming porous materials such as asteroids, comets, planets, and even the asteroid belt. The ejected material would continue to move into the new plasma environment of the Sun, so it is likely that cometary phenomena was occurring on any bodies affected during such a migration. This could also contribute to the porous materials. It's very evident that electrical phenomena are capable of explaining a wide range of formations. Formations of surfaces, entire bodies, and even formations of new stellar systems. Electric discharge should be considered among the possibilities for explanation.
Yeah, that's right. Whatever they said. Gonna have to watch it like a third time. Let's see here.
Welcome to Space News from the Electric Universe, brought to you by the Thunderbolts Project at thunderbolts.info. How do planets form? It's a question that astronomers with ever-increasing frequency have acknowledged is unresolved. For countless decades, astronomers have subscribed to the nebular hypothesis of planetary formation, which proposes that planets form from a process of accretion in a cloud of gas and dust that is gravitationally collapsed. But with the discovery of thousands of seemingly baffling exoplanetary systems, some astronomers are now openly searching for a, quote, whole new theory. In our own solar system, recent science discovery has only deepened the mystery of planet formation. Consider the findings of NASA's Dawn mission at the dwarf planet Ceres, the first object ever discovered in the main asteroid belt. The mysteries include why the heavily cratered surface of Ceres features a surprising absence of large craters, why we have never found any meteorites from Ceres on Earth, and it's a puzzle where exactly Ceres might have formed, in part because it's vastly larger and rounder than its asteroidal neighbors. As members of the Electric Universe community are well aware, Ceres' massively cratered surface may provide clear evidence of the electrical events in which it formed. In this episode, Thunderbolt's colleague, experimentalist Jacob Gable, explores the formation and evolution of Ceres in the Electric Universe.
Ceres is said to be a young body because the surface lacks the number of craters to be presumed an old body. That would be using impact theory by counting the number of craters on a surface and assuming a certain number of objects will impact over a given period. I personally reject this hypothesis, that rocks and dust left over from stellar formations smash together in a destructive process to form planets. Also specifically looking at Ceres, its home is in the asteroid belt and is surrounded by possible impactors. I'm also well aware of another alternative theory, in which the surface of Ceres was electrically machined. This hypothesis is supported by what are peculiarities of impact theory, what are features readily produced during an electrical discharge. Craters that have craters perched preferentially on the rims, or craters that share rims, craters that form polygonal shapes, and craters that have a sort of ripple bridge or distorted ring. After observing electrical discharge experiments firsthand, I can say with confidence that most of the craters on Ceres are indeed formed electrically. Craters I've observed time and time again stand out like beacons on a crater body such as Ceres. If this electrical hypothesis is true, what then was the source of such an electrical outburst capable of producing the features and bodies we observe? We find possible explanations to this question on previous space news. In a video done by Eugene Bagashov titled Mars Mysteries Reopened,
Not gonna work out
Eugene
very well.
discusses the discovery of low-density material on Martian surfaces, asteroids, and comets. These materials are suspected to be formed as a result of the low density. This finding gives rise to the hypothesis I will elaborate on after discussing another video done by Lloyd Johnson titled The Saturn-Earth Connection in Our Place in the Universe. In the video, all discussing the discovery of material ratios of water finding Saturn's moons, and how it differs greatly from the nebular hypothesis predictions. Another point to make note of is the creation of Mars and this would suggest that Earth and Saturn were close by at one point, or even that we received water from Saturn, which is what Emmanuel Velikovsky had suggested. As there's a connection between water found from Earth and water found from Saturn, there's a conundrum that arises. That being, Mars, the asteroid belt, and Jupiter sit in between the Earth and Saturn. This is only unfortunate in a nebular hypothesis, but it is a possibility in which what might have happened in an electrical hypothesis, where stars are formed along electrical currents and are subject to changes in those currents. Walt Willendorf also discussed the hypothesis he proposed, in which he suggested the planet Saturn was once a dwarf star with a plasma glow that encircled planets in its vicinity. Saturn was then captured by the sun, causing an electrical flare above Saturn and the resulting familiar solar system. I believe if this were to happen, the plasma or current from Saturn would have been removed and would have traveled. This could have caused enormous eruptions. In experiments with low-pressure discharges on silica, the electrical current can be shut off, causing material to be ejected from the surface. The eruptions can also be observed producing porosity throughout the silica, to make note of Eugene Bagashov's video. So it's quite plausible that Saturn could have played a more dominant role over the Earth. The Sun came into play and stole Saturn's electrical current. When the plasma was removed, material would be ejected, forming porous materials such as asteroids, comets,
I was
planets,
not pumping my arms. I was muttering.
So it's likely that cometary phenomena is occurring on any bodies affected during such a migration. This could have also contributed to the porous materials. It's very evident that electrical phenomena are capable of explaining a wide range of formations of surfaces, entire bodies, and even formations of new stellar systems. Electric discharge should be considered among the possibilities for explanation.
You will not kill!
I want peace. necessity to die daily. However often we think we have broken the rebellious self, we shall still find it alive. That this process cannot be without pain is sufficiently witnessed by the very history of the word mortification. But this intrinsic pain or death in mortifying the usurped self is not the whole story. Paradoxically, mortification, though itself a pain, is made easier by the presence of pain in its context. This happens, I think, principally in three ways. The human spirit will not even begin to try to surrender self-will as long as all seems to be well with it. Now, error and sin both have this property, that the deeper they are, the less their victim suspects their existence. They are masked evil. Pain is unmasked, unmistakable evil. Every man knows that something is wrong when he is being hurt. The masochist is no real exception. Sadism and masochism...
Wait a second. Every man knows... Let's just play that again.
offered back in delighted and delighting obedience by the creature, there most undoubtedly is heaven, and there the Holy Ghost proceeds. In the world as we now know it, the problem is how to recover this self-surrender. We are not merely imperfect creatures who must be improved. We are, as Newman said, rebels who must lay down our arms. The first answer, then, to the question why our cure should be painful is that to render back the will which we have so long claimed for our own is in itself, wherever and however it is done, a grievous pain. Even in paradise, I have supposed a minimal self-adherence to be overcome, though the overcoming and the yielding would there be rapturous. But to surrender a self-will inflamed and swollen with years of usurpation is a kind of death. We all remember this self-will as it was in childhood, the bitter, prolonged rage at every thwarting, the burst of passionate tears, the black, satanic wish to kill or die rather than to give in.
Die!
Hence the older type of nurse or parent was quite right in thinking that the first step in education is to break the child's will. Their methods were often wrong, but not to see the necessity is, I think, to cut oneself off from all understanding of spiritual laws. And if, now that we are grown up, we do not howl and stamp quite so much, that is partly because our elders began the process of breaking or killing our self-will in the nursery, and partly because the same passions now take more subtle forms, and have grown clever at avoiding death by various compensations. Hence the necessity to die daily. However often we think we have broken the rebellious self, we shall still find it alive. That this process cannot be without pain is sufficiently witnessed by the very history of the word mortification. But this intrinsic pain or death in mortifying the usurped self is not the whole story. Paradoxically, mortification, though itself a pain, is made easier by the presence of pain in its context. This happens, I think, principally in three ways. The human spirit will not even begin to try to surrender self-will as long as all seems to be well with it. Now, error and sin both have this property, that the deeper they are, the less their victim suspects their existence. They are masked evil. Pain is unmasked, unmistakable evil. Every man knows that something is wrong when he is being hurt. The masochist is no real exception. Sadism and masochism respectively isolate and then exaggerate a moment or aspect in normal sexual passion. Sadism exaggerates the aspect of capture and domination to a point at which only ill treatment of the beloved will satisfy the pervert, as though he said, "I am so much master that I even torment you." Masochism exaggerates the complementary and opposite aspect and says, "I am so enthralled that I welcome even pain at your hands." Unless the pain were felt as evil, as an outrage underlining the complete mastery of the other party, it would cease, for the masochist, to be an erotic stimulus. And pain is not only immediately recognizable evil, but evil impossible to ignore. We can rest contentedly in our sins and in our stupidities, and anyone who has watched gluttons shoveling down the most exquisite foods as if they did not know what they were eating will admit that we can ignore even pleasure. But pain insists upon being attended to. God whispers to us in our pleasures, speaks in our conscience, but shouts in our pain. It is his megaphone to rouse a deaf world. A bad man, happy, is a man without the least inkling that his actions do not answer, that they are not in accord with the laws of the universe. A perception of this truth lies at the back of the universal human feeling that bad men ought to suffer. It is no use turning up our noses at this feeling as if it were wholly base. On its mildest level, it appeals to everyone's sense of justice. Once, when my brother and I, as very small boys, were drawing pictures at the same table, I jerked his elbow and caused him to make an irrelevant line across the middle of his work. The matter was amicably settled by my allowing him to draw a line of equal length across mine. That is, I was put in his place, made to see my negligence from the other end. On a sterner level, the same idea appears as retributive punishment, or giving a man what he deserves. Some enlightened people would like to banish all conceptions of retribution or desert from their theory of punishment, and place its value wholly in the deterrence of others or the reform of the criminal himself. They do not see that by so doing they render all punishment unjust. What can be more immoral than to inflict suffering on me for the sake of deterring others if I do not deserve it? And if I do deserve it, you are admitting the claims of retribution. And what can be more outrageous than to catch me and submit me to a disagreeable process of moral improvement without my consent, unless, once more, I deserve it? On yet a third level we get vindictive passion, the thirst for revenge. This, of course, is evil, and expressly forbidden to Christians, but it has perhaps appeared already from our discussion of sadism and masochism that the ugliest things in human nature are perversions of good or innocent things. The good thing of which vindictive passion is the perversion comes out with startling clarity in Hobbes's definition of revengefulness: desire by doing hurt to another to make him condemn some fact of his own. Revenge loses sight of the end in the means, but its end is not wholly bad. It wants the evil of the bad man to be to him what it is to everyone else. This is proved by the fact that the avenger wants the guilty party not merely to suffer, but to suffer at his hands, and to know it, and to know why. Hence the impulse to taunt the guilty man with his crime at the moment of taking vengeance. Hence, too, such natural expressions as, "I wonder how he'd like it if the same thing were done to him," or "I'll teach him." For the same reason, when we are going to abuse a man in words, we say we are going to let him know what we think of him. When our ancestors referred to pains and sorrows as God's vengeance upon sin, they were not necessarily attributing evil passions to God. They may have been recognizing the good element in the idea of retribution, until the evil man finds evil unmistakably present in his existence in the form